Happy Monday. Happy Stanley Cup Final week. Welcome into Cup Final week here on Daily Faceoff Live. We're live on the DFO YouTube, and as always, a presentation of Bet365. Download the app, use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Frank Seravalli, a few hours away from flying up to E-Town for the Cup Final. How you feeling?
Good. Let's go. Giddy up. Feels like it's been a while. A weekend free of hockey. Didn't really know what to do with myself. So looking forward to the Cup Final getting underway. Media day on Tuesday. Game 1 Wednesday. Game 2 Friday. Giddy up.
It's going to be a jam-packed week. Lots of fun. And listen, we're going to talk some off-season and all of that stuff in a little bit, including an update to your top 50 free agents list. But let's begin with the Stanley Cup Final, Frank. And we'll call it a presidential way. I'm going to allow you to just make an opening statement on this Stanley Cup Final. Give me your early impressions, your gut feel. What's in your head as we get set to cover another matchup between the Panthers and Oilers?
I think the biggest thing that stands out to me, the word that I use and doesn't necessarily know if it'll define this year or not, but inevitable. That at some point in his career, Connor McDavid is going to stop at nothing to get his fingerprints on Lord Stanley's mug. Does that happen with Matthew Tkachuk and the Florida Panthers standing in the way? Could it go on beyond this? Of course it could. The Panthers are a great team. They're ferocious. The way that they attack, the way that they smell blood in the water, they're back in a third consecutive Stanley Cup Final for a reason. But I just feel like with the history of this sport, with the ability that this Oilers team has shown to be able to clean up their game in a significant way. Look, I didn't pick them to win the Stanley Cup Final, to win the Stanley Cup at the outset of the playoffs, because I wasn't really sure how they would look going into it. They had a very average finish to their regular season. They gave away the first 2 games of the playoffs to the LA Kings and had to fight and scrap for their lives. And since then, they've been unbelievably clean, 12-2, and one of those losses is a game that they had a 3-goal lead and coughed it up to the Dallas Stars in the third period by taking 3 consecutive penalties. Short of that, they're 12-1. I mean, that's about as good of a run as you could have into the Stanley Cup Final, and I think their quality of competition is a bit better than the Panthers to this point. I'll take Vegas and Dallas over Toronto and Carolina. That doesn't mean anything that the Panthers won't win this series. It's just that I feel like the way that the Edmonton Oilers have arrived at this spot, they're better off than they were last year.
Yeah, they are. I mean, you can look at the on-ice, off-ice numbers for McDavid and Draisaitl. Like last season, through 3 rounds, if it wasn't Connor and or Leon getting the scoring done, the Edmonton Oilers weren't getting scoring, and that's just so drastically different this time around where they have these pieces. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins was excellent in the Western Conference Final. Their bottom 6 looks really, really complete. And the other thing that I think is massive is this Oilers blue line is way better at moving the puck than it was a year ago. You take out Ceci, you take out Desharnais, you add in Wallman and Klingberg, and all of a sudden these skilled Oilers forwards, they got D-men who can just rifle the puck up to them. They can attack with a bit of speed this year, which is not what they could do last year.
Yeah, but the big question will be, how will they handle that Florida forecheck? They've done a pretty good job, and they've had the puck, and they've been efficient getting out of their own end. We went in depth 25 minutes on the Cup Final in today's DFO rundown, and Jake Wallman is my X factor for Edmonton. His efficiency, the way that he's able to get rid of the puck, I mean, I think that's been hugely beneficial for the Oilers. So, look, there's some obvious key points here. Got to get off to a better start in the series. Can't give away a couple games like they did. Not bleeping good enough and dig in. I mean, those are key words from Connor McDavid after Game 2 in the Stanley Cup Final last year, as we saw in the Amazon Prime series. But this team has a chance to write a different story starting on home ice with a better roster.
13-6 are teams with home ice advantage in the last 19 Stanley Cup Finals. Gregor shared that stat with us earlier this morning. I do think this series starting in Edmonton, Frank, I don't think the Oilers go down 2-0 out of the gates like they did last year. Starting in Edmonton, I think, gives them a much, much better chance this season than last.
Yeah, totally agree. And the history there, which we touched on a little bit, it's certainly there as well. Wayne Gretzky, Sidney Crosby both lost their first Stanley Cup Final appearance. The next year they won, and it was against the same team that they had lost to the year prior. So to me, I think there's some weird way that the hockey gods are connected to all this. And for a lot of those reasons, I'm going Oilers in 7, but I think it's going to be incredibly close.
I think it's going to be very, very close as well. The Oilers have shown this year they're very comfortable in close games as well. Frank, let's do a little rank 'em here. A rematch in the Stanley Cup Final, the same two jerseys going at it. It's happening in the same two cities, but there are a lot of new players in this Cup Final. You look at both the Oilers and Panthers, and in terms of everyday, or call them close to everyday players, each side has 7 fresh faces that could appear in this series. I want you to rank them just 1, 2, 3. I only want your top 3 in terms of how big of a role you think they'll play in this series. So out of these 14 fresh faces, rank 1, 2, 3 for me.
On each side or just on one side?
Full series. Give me 3 players you can mishmash Oilers and Panthers in your list.
I'm going to say Jake Wallman 1 for the Oilers. As mentioned, his ability to make short passes and make quick plays to get the Oilers efficiently exiting their zone. I don't know if they can win without him doing it. 2, I will say Brad Marchand, because he's constantly in the face of the opposition. He had a very quiet round 3, but this is a guy that has a clutch gene and has won a Stanley Cup before, and that'll be big. And then 3, I would say Seth Jones. I know John Klingberg has been important to the Oilers. Trent Frederick has given the Oilers important minutes. And Kasperi Kapanen has been trusted, interestingly enough, in late game situations. But I think Jones and his addition this year for Florida, he was one of the best players on the ice when it mattered most for this team with their season on the ropes against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I think Jones and also there's an efficiency to his game when he's at his best. He's very simple that I think can help the Panthers in a big way.
Now, of course, you don't get to add new players without subtracting a few as well. And Frank, there's a handful of names on either side that were really, really key players last year, but aren't playing in this series. I just kind of threw out some of the more notable ones. The Panthers obviously don't have Brandon Montour, Oliver Ekman-Larsson on their blue line. Vladimir Tarasenko was their deadline ad up front. The Oilers lost a bunch of youth in their forward group with McLeod, Fogle, and Holloway, and I already touched on both Desharnais and Ceci no longer being on their blue line. But who do you think, I'll say, lost the most from their roster last year when you look at this? You can obviously, the Panthers' 2 blue liners definitely stand out, even though Seth Jones has just been so good since coming in at the deadline. But Montour and Ekman-Larsson ate up some really key minutes for them last year.
Yeah, I'm going to say the Panthers, because as much as the Oilers missed McLeod, Holloway, Broberg isn't on this board either.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Broberg.
And Ceci, that I think those guys were, I'll call them lower level players, bottom of the lineup pieces, whereas Montour and Ekman-Larsson just played much more central and pivotal roles for the Panthers in winning.
Yeah, Ryan McLeod, a big part of that Oilers penalty kill last year, which was so good throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs. That's another really key area of this series, and we'll kind of do our X Factors tomorrow. We want to save some things to preview, both Tuesday and on game day, but the Oilers PK will be a massive story in this postseason. But you kind of do like the trades in your head as much as we talked about the Oilers blue line being better. That forward group going Tarasenko out, Marchand in, man, it gives that Panthers top 9 just a totally different look.
Yeah, and that third line could be deadly and pivotal for the Florida Panthers. A couple big brain players and some brawn.
Big brain players, Frank, that's a perfect transition to our next topic. The NHL has began announcing the winners of their major awards, and it's Alexander Barkov who wins the Selke. And you go through this forward group in Florida, so many of these guys got Selke votes. They had 2 of the 3 finalists, I should say, with both Barkov and Reinhart. Let me just ask you, was Barkov number 1 on your ballot?
He was not. Jack Eichel got 5 first place votes, and I was one of them. Not that I'm in the interest of changing it up for change it up's sake. I thought Barkov was obviously really good, but he also missed 15 games this year. And I thought with that injury, with the time missed, that this was, if you're going to change it up, that this was the year to do it. I thought that opened the door, and not to take anything away from Sam Reinhart's candidacy on his same team, but if you're the best defensive forward in the league, then that means you're also the best defensive forward on your team. So that probably knocked Reinhart's candidacy down a little bit, in my view. Seravalli is a very complete player. And all three guys coming from the state of Florida kind of says something in and of itself. But I thought Jack Eichel was great from start to finish this year. And I thought that they were in a spot where this might have been a year to maybe do something a little bit different. Barkov now has 3 Selke Trophy wins and 2 in as many years.
Yeah, 3 in 5 years as well. That moves him into a tie for the third most all time. Guy Carbonneau, Pavel Datsyuk, Yuri Lettinen also have 3. Bob Gainey has 4. Patrice Bergeron leads the pack with 6. I do love, again, it's been happening obviously for a number of years now, but the voting transparency, right? We get to see the breakdown of who went where. I got a chuckle along your point of the Reinhardt thing. Both Lundell and Evan Rodriguez getting, votes that are 5th place votes, I understand, but I'm like, come on, you're telling me what? Someone had 4 or 3 Florida Panthers on their 5-man ballot? That's crazy.
Yeah, definitely a little bit strange. I thought Kopitar had a great year. Didn't give Nico Hischier the love that he got, finishing in 4th, but I'm always a big proponent of some of the centers out there that do a ton of the heavy lifting. Adam Lowry, Jordan Staal. I mean, Jordan Stahl's name is there just about every year. And so I just think there's a lot of quality all around players. To see such a large gap in voting, I think is probably disappointing in a year that Barkov was 15 games out of the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously watch a lot more Western Conference hockey than Eastern Conference. Joel Eriksson was the one guy who my eyebrow raised up seeing him all the way down at 24th. Only 2 people had Eriksson on his ballot. Granted, he also missed a lot of time, but I think Eriksson deserves. If I had to rank best defensive players in the league, Eriksson is much, much higher on the list. Sidney Crosby tied for 31. He's also probably much higher on my list.
Yeah, and look, this is a tough award to vote for. I know there's a lot of data that people throw at it, but a lot of people view this through their own individual prism. Again, I had Eichel. He finished 5th. He was number 1 on my list this year.
All right, let's move along. Frank, again, more awards going to be announced as the week kind of goes on here in the NHL. But our offseason preview today is about, Jack Eichel's former team, the Buffalo Sabres. And Kevyn Adams is staying at the helm. He's going to have Jarmo Kekalainen on his staff. Now, we actually didn't touch on that last week. What did you make of the Kekalainen addition to the Sabres front office?
I thought it was really interesting in the way that it was rolled out, that you saw Kevyn Adams providing quotes saying that he was sitting in on these meetings. And I guess it's always important to be in lockstep with the people that you work with, but it almost made it sound like the Sabres were presenting it like, hey, this was Kevyn Adams' idea and we're adding in this other voice to the front office. Well, why? It's because you've had a lack of success. 5 years under Kevyn Adams, 0 playoff berths, 14 now consecutively as an organization, haven't made it in a full season since Terry Pegula has owned the team. It's been an incredibly destructive run, and I think this is going to be a make or break offseason for the Sabres moving forward, because they've got to decide which direction they're going. Are they retooling this a bit and trying to figure it out? Are they adding pieces in win now mode? Are they trading off some guys that may or may not want to be part of it in the future? They've got a lot of questions to answer. And I think in a lot of ways, though, Jarmo Kekalainen coming in to be that guy who can be the sounding board, he's very direct. He's blunt. You don't really spend a lot of time wondering what Jarmo Kekalainen is thinking. And so with that, that's going to be key in setting an order and a list of priorities, because that's one thing that, as Kevyn Adams has made calls around the league, even in these last few weeks, the sense that's emanated from these teams is, hey, we want to do something. And then the teams respond back and say, okay, but what is something? Who are you looking to move? And it's like, well, I don't know. It could be anyone here. And that's exciting for some teams to think about or consider. But what is the priority list for the Sabres? Where are their voids? What are their holes? Who is it that's not coming back? And how do you find a way to sort of break free from this idea that if I'm Kevyn Adams, I really like some of the players on this roster as an individual player or on paper, but the collection of parts for this team doesn't work. We've seen it too many times. We're seeing the core of the Toronto Maple Leafs break up after 9 consecutive playoff appearances. The Sabres are just looking for one. They would die to be the Toronto Maple Leafs and the run of success that they've had. Yet we're asking very similar questions of Toronto's core. Why are we not asking the same questions of Buffalo's core? And who among those high-priced pillar foundation level players could we see on the move? Because you'd have to think changing out one of them after it hasn't worked just makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, you can look at the board. We had the cap space, 23.2 million, but then you see that list of RFAs on the side, and it's like, okay, that 23 million, that goes away pretty quick once you sign Peterka and Byram. And then you want to bring back probably Jack Quinn and Ryan McLeod, who had a very good 20-goal season with Buffalo. And it's like, hey, that 23 mil goes fast. And again, if you sign Quinn, Peterka, and McLeod, you all of a sudden have 13 forwards under contract. And once you sign Byram, well, there's your 6 defensemen that are under contract. Like, it's very clear any big change that's going to happen, if they're going to dip into free agency, whatever, it first has to start with, as you touched on, I guess I'm just echoing it, making decisions on some of these guys. You need to identify who's a fit going forward and who's not, and start shedding some of this.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it starts and finishes with the RFAs, because what if you're making a decision, hey, we're going to explore the market for Owen Power. We're going to explore the market, probably unlikely, but for Rasmus Dahlin, or look at Matthias Samuelsson and the long-term deal that he has. Any one of those players, Alex Tuch up front, you need to decide who's there for the long haul and who isn't, and start with that first before you start to deal with some of the contractual things and who's an RFA or a UFA. Answer that question, who's part of the solution, and then go from there.
It's already June 2nd. I mean, we're 3.5 weeks away from draft talk getting heavy. Last year, I know we touched on this last week, but we saw 2 big trades during the Cup Final. So the time is kind of now for the Sabres to get moving. Definitely one of the more intriguing teams, especially in the Eastern Conference. Let's get to our big segment for today. It's a new edition of Icebreakers, and it's brought to you by Budweiser. Budweiser is encouraging buds to make time for the playoffs, not excuses. Every goal, every win, every game is better enjoyed with your buds. So phone a bud, text a bud, because time is running out. Call out their excuses for bailing on the playoffs. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Make them count. When it's springtime, it's go time with Budweiser. All right, Frank, your top 50 free agents list has been updated now at dailyfaceoff.com. There is one new entrant in the top 10. It's Jonathan Toews. I find it so funny when we had the Gabe Landeskog conversation about the playoffs, and it's like, oh, look out, Gabe's coming into that lineup, and he's going to make an impact. And then you look at Toews, and people go, well, he hasn't played hockey in so long. How much of an impact could he have? But those two guys last played in the NHL in the same season. Actually, Toews had a couple of games that next season as well. So let me start with just a simple, how much gas do you think Jonathan Toews has left in the tank?
Man, that's the question that all these teams want to know, right? 37 years old, hasn't played in 2 full seasons, but has an unbelievable track record, with all due respect to Gabe Landeskog, that Landeskog couldn't dream of. 3 Stanley Cups, 1 Selke, 1 Conn Smythe, one of the best players of his generation, already voted into the NHL Top 100, future first ballot Hall of Famer, who, by the way, if he decides to play, will reset the clock on that Hall of Fame eligibility back to 3 years. Doesn't matter to him. He's getting in at some point anyway. But the question is, what can we reasonably expect? He got to 31 points, 15 goals, 31 points in 53 games in his last season. But that was also a season that was still marred by this chronic immune response syndrome, that he's gone on this alternative healing journey to India to seek comfort and to get back to himself. He's been skating since at least December. He's back to his normal playing weight and is at his playing shape. And the fun part about it is, if that was during a tough season, even though it's been now, it'll be 3 seasons later, is it reasonable to expect that as the baseline of what a minimum Jonathan Toews contribution would be like for your team next season? That would equate to 47 points over an 82-game season, so nearly 50. So definitely not nothing. And the other part is that it's probably going to cost you on your cap nothing. You could sign him to a league minimum deal with performance-based, either games played or points-based threshold bonuses that then could be applied to the following season's cap, where the cap is increasing yet again. So you're giving away 2 years ahead of time cap space to Jonathan Toews. If you're interested in playing it that way, I would just imagine that there's no shortage of, just to think of them off the top of your head, a handful of teams that would be interested in Jonathan Toews. The hometown Winnipeg Jets, the Toronto Maple Leafs need center depth if they don't re-sign John Tavares, even if they do. What about the Colorado Avalanche? Brock Nelson didn't appear to be the issue. Seems like you could live a healthy life in Denver. That would be a pretty interesting stop, playing with Nathan McKinnon. But then you start to think about the shiny toy and the Vegas Golden Knights and their ready-made team that could compete. What about a reunion with Stan Bowman and the Edmonton Oilers? I mean, you go through all the different possibilities and it gets fascinating. But the best part about Toews is that he doesn't need to wait until July 1st. Not that there's any rush. He could sign today for next season. He is a total free agent.
Yeah, and a couple other connections, at least people in the chat are making, but it just kind of emphasizes your point. Could he go join up with Coach Q in Anaheim and maybe try to bring that young team a step closer? Is that a challenge Toews would like? What about going back with Patty Kane in Detroit? Like, so many different angles you could go with. And that ties into what I wanted to ask next, Frank. Do you think it's a situation where Toews sits there and says, okay, this is the framework of the deal I want, league min with all these incentives, everyone who's interested, and then I'm going to pick from there? Or do you think there could be like a bidding war here where some team goes, whoa, we think you can get us 50 points. We have no problem giving you $3 million guaranteed for that.
Look, I don't know that after earning $100 million in his career, that part of it is necessarily what's driving this decision for Jonathan Toews. Does everyone want to be paid and compensated fairly? Of course. To go through all that work and then to come back, you're not just looking for $775K. But the point is, this is more about a destination and a story that you want to tell as you rewrite your NHL narrative, which has only been with one team to this point in time. He wants a chance to do it on his own terms. I can't imagine that he's sitting there going, well, first team to offer me $5 million guaranteed, you're it. Like, I don't think that's how he's thinking about it.
Jonathan Toews, 37 years old, born in 88, another free agent born in 1988. Brad Marchand, and what an interesting case he is heading into free agency, Frank. Oh, you were also born in 1988, correct. But let's mishmash the final talk and this free agent talk. Brad Marchand and his play, 14 points in 17 games. Has he either A, increased how much money he'll get on the open market, or B, is this run just increasing the likelihood that he goes, I want to be a Florida Panther no matter what?
Might be both. I could see a little bit of that, but I could also see winning a Stanley Cup in the next couple weeks and saying, man, that was such an awesome run, unforgettable. But I'm going to go cash in somewhere. I mean, if you think about his career earnings and how impactful of a player he's been, they don't really line up. He didn't get that massive deal until he really burst onto the stage at the World Cup of Hockey. And since then, he's been on that long-term contract. So his career earnings aren't necessarily near some of his peers. And that's why I think maybe a 3-year deal at a pretty juicy number is probably what pushed him out of Boston.
Yeah, $73.7 million is the career earnings. And now to kind of blend that one into another question, the one big mover on your board, Sam Bennett is up into that 2 spot in your top 10. If Marchand wants, can they do Marchand and Bennett? Do they have the space? Would they have the appetite to commit that much to 2 guys, one in his late 30s, one in his late 20s?
Yeah, so one thing about these numbers here, as you see projected cap on our screen, those are from AFP Analytics, our friends who do a great job. And by the way, they absolutely nailed yet another one. They had projected Kyle Palmieri at 2 times 5.03. He signs with the Islanders at 2 times 4.75. So very close. They're really doing a great job nailing these numbers. But I will say that I think the Bennett number is way low compared to what he's going to get on the market. I originally had Besser in that 2 spot because there was such a disparity with the goals that Besser scores as a regular season producer that he would be the second highest earning player in this class. And then, the numbers would even argue that Nikolai Ehlers is a guy who would be right behind him. But this is a blend of both dollars and interest. And so, when you look at the impact that Bennett's had in these playoffs, 10 goals scored to this point in time, he's been unbelievable. And I think that number is well north of 6 times 6.4. I think it's probably close to 7 times 7.5. I think he's going to be broaching $50 million. I don't think it's anywhere near the 10 that a lot of people have been talking about or projecting, but he's definitely going to get paid. And he's sort of moved up this board with these playoffs and has a chance to send in or make a final closing argument that's already been an incredible case for him to get that kind of money with this postseason run that he's been on with the Panthers.
All right, first off, top 50 UFAs. We'll put the link in our chat right now. If people want to go check it out at dailyfaceoff.com. I'm just going to blend this into hashtag askdfo. Frank, we did get a question earlier about your thoughts on the Palmieri deal out on Long Island. Is that a sign, signing a guy in his 30s, is that a sign that they are, going to keep pushing and try to be a playoff team? Or is that just simply player loves organization loves player, and they want to keep him in the room?
I think this was one that was done right before the trade deadline in March. Got to a comfortable place. He didn't want to leave. He liked it. Wasn't asking for an exorbitant sum. I think falls right in line with sort of market value. You always think about the if each 10 points is $1 million, 48 points last year, 4.75. Like, he's right in that neighborhood, and not asking for a ton for a guy that can kind of routinely score you 30 goals, 28 goals. And he did it in a year that was down for everyone's numbers on the island really suffered. Their power play was so bad. So to still get to 24 goals, I thought pretty important. And I think it's a win-win. Like, he's not breaking the bank. He can obviously be productive for 2 more years. Why not? I just don't think it signals anything about what the future holds.
All right, let's keep cruising along with the show and get to our daily bets for Bet365. Want to get in on the action for the Stanley Cup Final? At Bet365, they got you. Game props, player props, totals, and money line. You can even bet on futures, and they have a whole bunch loaded up for this Cup Final. Whatever your bet, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get in on the game. An official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Must be 19 or older. Today, I got a couple of Oilers goal score props. Tomorrow, I got a couple Panthers ones. And of course, Wednesday will be game 1 of this series. But Corey Perry is playing top line minutes, and he's on that top power play unit. And with no Zach Hyman, there is no one to bump him out of those spots. So Corey Perry to score 2+ goals, over 1.5. Parlayed with Evan Bouchard to score 2+ goals, a couple of Bouch bombs. That comes out to plus 519. That's the juice you like, Frank. Also, Corey Perry to go over 2.5 goals, 3+ goals, plus 240. I am all in on the worm in another Cup Final.
Okay, so last year's Cup Final, Corey Perry had 1 goal in 7 games. The previous Cup Final that he played in, which would have been, just double checking my math here, he was in Tampa for a bit. He was in Montreal and played in a Cup Final. He scored 1. He was in Dallas. Played in the Cup Final in 2020. The bubble had 3 in that series. So he's only done it once. And in 2007, when he went in his second year at the Ducks, he scored twice. So he's only in 4 Cup Final appearances, has only scored more than 2 goals 1 time. Just for history, I know he's been lights out, and it's hard to bet against the worm. I'm just wanted to provide the historical context necessary for a play like this.
He has hit this number in the 2-goal number in every series so far this season. He had 2 against the Kings, 3 against the Golden Knights, and 2 against the Dallas Stars. So he's been hitting this pretty routine. So is Bouchard.
No, I think it's a really interesting play. I just think the odds are probably not correct. Like, it should be a plus money play for him to score 2 goals in this series.
Yeah. All right, Frank, let's wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time. The London Knights are your 2025 Memorial Cup champions. They beat the Medicine Hat Tigers. A weekend that was, as it always is, or a week, I should say, a great celebration of junior hockey in Canada. But the interesting wrinkle coming out of this, whether it's the rumblings of where Gavin McKenna might go, the news that Keaton Verhoff is leaving the Victoria Royals and going to the NCAA, as you watch the London Knights celebrate on the screen here, listen, the Memorial Cup's never going to go away, but it might never look like this again with the type of players in it.
Perhaps, yeah, it's definitely a changing junior hockey landscape. Some would argue that there's a chance for major junior hockey to get even more impressive talent, that you could pull players from the US that go, instead of playing in the USHL, to the CHL. I don't know that that will necessarily be the case. I still think the best play for all of junior hockey is to put the USHL on par with the CHL and make it a 4-team sort of, North American junior league, as opposed to just the CHL 4-league circuit, and then have the USHL have a permanent presence at the Memorial Cup. Instead of one team as the host, just add in a 4th USHL team. And it's really not that different. People say, oh, that's blasphemous having a USHL team compete for the Memorial Cup. Like, there are American teams that have won and hosted the Memorial Cup. The first to ever do was the Portland Winterhawks. So I don't know why we would stand on those grounds, even though it's, a sort of Canadian institution. But this landscape is definitely changing. And congrats, by the way, to Easton Cowan for winning MVP. And also, look out for Gavin McKenna, as you mentioned. Pretty big week. I have a feeling I'm told he's going to be visiting some NCAA schools. I would expect Michigan, and heard some rumblings about a visit to Penn State, but that isn't confirmed yet. I wouldn't be surprised if there's others on the list.
All right, there you go. That is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Frank, safe travels to Edmonton. Look forward to doing the show once again tomorrow, and then live from the Cup Final on Wednesday. It's going to be a great time. Everybody in the YouTube, thank you very much for the inbox questions. We'll see you right back here tomorrow at noon Eastern.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content, from daily live shows with Frank Seravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.